Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Shvis, Perek Sheni Halacha Hey. We learned the Mishnah on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis. I just want to review a few parts of the Mishnah by heart, and we will start today learning Daf Yud Gimel all the way on top of the Amud in the beginning of the Gemara. So first of all, quickly to review, that when it comes to the establishment of what year did a product grow in, and why do we need to know what year did a certain plant, a certain item grow in? For two halachas. First of all, for the laws of maisris, that since in the cycle of 7 years, the maisris of the first second is not like the third, 4 and 5 is not like the sixth. All of them have to have from their product separated truma gedola, followed by meiser rishon, of course, aside of the trumas meiser from the truma gedola. But then in the first and the second year, you have to separate meiser sheni. In the third year, meiser ani. 4 in the fifth year, meiser sheni, and in the sixth year, meiser ani. So to know what year, we have to establish what year did this product grow in to determine what type of meisers have to be removed from it. And as we are learning Masechta Shvius concerning the halachas of Shvius, something is the product of the sixth year. It has no kedushas Shvius in it. There are no restrictions, not the way you harvest it, not the way you can gather it, and not the way you can do business with it, not until when you can eat it. And if something is the product of the seventh year, there's a lot of restrictions connected to it. We can generally use the term, it is imbued with kedushas Shvius. I want to go over one detail that we mentioned in the last year, and just to add a little bit to it, is that there is a halacha that sfichin are usher to be consumed midrabanan. And sfichin means any aftergrowth of a plant that has to be planted every time you want to have its fruit. Unlike a tree, you plant a tree once and every year its fruits grows. When it comes to basically all else, grains, legumes, vegetables, there is one opinion, the sheet of Rabbi Akiva, which we did not yet mention in the last year, that interprets the words when the Torah says in Bahar that we're not allowed to harvest. He understands it to mean that midai raisa, a product that needs to be planted every year, that is considered a 7th year product, may not be harvested nor eaten midai raisa. That is the shita of Rabbi Akiva as it's brought down in the Safra. We do not paskin like Rabbi Akiva. We hold that sfichin is asur midrabanan to be consumed. And another important detail, which we'll get to a lot later, is that when it comes to determining halacha lamaisa, the dinim of sfichim, all of the rules that we will be speaking about today, that we spoke about in the last year, whether it is after a shlish, after the hashrasha, after chanata, after lekita, these are going to be the 4 terms that we're going to go over. When it comes to sfichin, we say that if there was any amount of growth that happened on the 6th year, since the whole Isur is only midrabanan, we will consider it to be a product of the 6th year, and it will not be usher, not to harvest it, nor to eat it. Of course, we don't harvest anything on the Shemitah year, kedarkoi. The Torah says, lo yisiktzer, but the way we can harvest anything else, the fruit, the apple, before this man habiyud and to consume it, etc., the same thing will be for sfichin. I'm just touching upon it because we left it a little bit too vague. But anyways, we are trying to determine what year does this product belong to, both concerning the dinim of Maisris and concerning the dinim of Shvius. So here are the general rules, and then the Mishnah had the exception. The general rules, and all of this will be the topic of today's daf. The Gemara is going to go into the sources of all of it. And that is, when it comes to grains, olives, and grapes, only these 3, grains, olives, and grapes, we go after when did it reach a third of its maturity. More details about the meaning of the third of the maturity we're going to have in today's daf, but that's the general concept. Shlish Means if it reached a third of its maturity in the 6th year, it's a product of the 6th year. Benegea Maisres, Maiser Ani.
Rabbi Zans, can I ask you a question?
Or
How do you the breaking point? Because you say you'll reach the majority of the maturity. How can you predict what would be
didn't say
the amount
majority, I
of
said
the
a third, a
production?
third, a third,
A third,
a third, a
yeah,
shlish.
I understand. A third of the production of the maturity of the tree. How much the production is going to be?
Okay, so let me give you one way that we're going to go today with a third, Yakir. That people that are in the business of farmers, they know that this tree will give me, let's say, 100 gallons of oil, a mushroom. Every year, this tree produces enough olives to make 100 gallons of oil. If the person would harvest the olives too early, as long as they can still get a third of the 100 gallons, 33.33, that's the way we'll define a third of its maturity. So there's the maximum potential. This person, for whatever reason, made an early harvest. Early harvest means the item is not full. That means you're going to get less out of it. If you can get at least a third of what normally you would have gotten, that's called a shlish. And if that happened, that is the year. So if it happened on the second year that it reached the third, even though you did not harvest it, you let it grow to its full maturity. Doesn't matter. It's a product of the second year. You give Maisa Sheni. You don't give Maisa Rani. Okay. So these are again, that's grains, olives, and grapes. When it comes generally to all other fruits, the determining moment is chanata. And what a taich chanata is that when something, I mean, the word is emergence or budding. We're going to go chanata in this Masechta, is that when something begins to come out of the branch, even fruits, they come out as a flower. And then the petals of the flower fall off. And when they fall off, the fruit begins to emerge. That's the detail of chanat. When the flower falls, so now the fruit can be seen, the beginning of the fruit. Basar chanata. And then when it comes to greens, when it comes to vegetables, we go basar likita, it goes to when was it actually picked. Very simple. Picked on the 6th year, product of the 6th year. Picked on the 7th year, I already mentioned. Don't ask, how did you even pick it on the 7th year, svichen? Because since svichen, we paskin is midrabanan, if it only came out of the ground, amashuhu, we are benigea dinim svichen, we are allowed to harvest it. But since you picked it on the 7th year, it won't be svichen, but it's going to have the kedusha of shviz. Kedusha of shviz, benigea biur, benigea schoira, and other dinim of shmita. These are the general rules. Now, the Mishnah began on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis. The Mishnah began with 4 exceptions. Oires doichen, pragin, and shumshumin. We're going to taich rice, millet. Let's go with poppy seed and sesame seed. And the Mishnah says a new category, a new determining point, that those 4 items, you know how we determine the year. When did it take root? Hashrasha. And the big question that we're going to have in today's daf and in tomorrow's daf is why. Now, when we learned the Mishnah in the last year, and we're going to learn this on daf Yud Gimel, there's going to be 2 reasons. The reason we're going to learn today is because since they do not grow at the same pace, they are planted at the same time, they take root at the same time, but going from there, everyone from these 4 items, they're all different. And since we do not want for us to have a harvest that has in it maisris from separate years, let's say by a vegetable, let's just say we go after lakita, they're not harvested at the same time. They're harvested a little bit now, a little bit later. Let's say we would go after shlish. They're not ready shlish at the same time. They don't grow at the same pace. What happens at the same time is the planting, which for sure does not count, because planting without taking root is really not planting. So we take a point in the earliest where they all take root at the same time, even though going forward they don't grow at the same pace. And what do we accomplish? That every plantation will have one rule of maisris, or either it's Shemitah produce or it's not, and not half and half. That's going to be the reason we're going to give today. One more chazara of the Mishnah because it's neged to today's daf. After the Mishnah gave us the 4 exceptions, oiris, doichen, pragin, and shumshumin, the Mishnah spoke about 2 other items, and I'm going to speak now only about the first, pul hamitzri. Pul hamitzri, I'm going to teach it, Egyptian bean. That helps you. So we had the shita of Rab Shimon Hashizuri, who says, and this is important, that these beans, some people planted them for its seed, others planted it for its green. If you planted it for the green, then it's like any other vegetable. The rule of Pul HaMitzri will be Lekita. But if you planted it for the seed, says Rab Shimon Shazuri, then Pul HaMitzri will be like Oides Doichen Pragen and Shumshumim. It's going to be a 5th item. Because same logic, because Pul HaMitzri, the seeds are not harvested at the same time. That was the Mishnah. Now we're going to introduce today a brisa. We're going to have more of this brisa in 2 daf from now. But let me say something gavaldik. So again, if I plant the Pul HaMitzri for the greens, vegetable. If I plant it for the seeds, let's go with Shimon Shazuri, then taking root. What happens if a person planted it initially for one purpose and then they change their mind? And this can go both ways. You planted it for its seeds, and then the farmer says, no, I want to have its greens. Be'ikir. No one throws away anything. Make no mistake. The question is, what is your main reason? What's the main purpose? Or the other way around. Now, there's going to be a lot of nuance that we don't have to confuse ourselves now. In one of the cases where you planted it for one intent, and then you changed your mind, and the brisa is vague, the Gemara is going to have to work it out on Tunda from now, we say like this. Oy bazoi, since you changed your mind, if the green was fully ready before Rosh Hashanah of any given year, let's go from 6th to 7th, Shvi'is. If the green was ready before Rosh Hashanah, then we're gonna say that for the green, for that one, that the green was ready, Likita. Ironically, if the green was ready before Rosh Hashanah, but since the green was ready, it's like a vegetable, so we're not going to say it belongs to that year. It belongs to the year that you harvested it in. So if you harvested it after Rosh Hashanah, it's going to belong to the next year. If the green was not ready before Rosh Hashanah, then we're going to say, now we look at Hashrasha. So we're going to have scenarios where you're going to have a harvest, and at the end of the day, this harvest will not share the same tithing. So as much as we are attempting, that will be today's reason. Why did we make an exception by Oides, Doichen, Pragin, and Shumshumin? Because we don't want for one harvest to have tithings belonging to 2 years. We're going to have to acknowledge that there will be unusual scenarios, Beleis Bereda, that there'll be a mixture. You're going to gather everything together. Some of it will be because the green was ready before Rosh Hashanah, it's going to go to the next year. The ones that the greens were not ready before Rosh Hashanah, if you planted it close to Rosh Hashanah, some will be like this, some will be like that, because they don't grow at the same pace. Then you're going to go to Adarab, Basar Hashrasha, the seeds. We're going to, and we're just going to have to come to the point that sometimes it won't work, and we'll have to figure out how to tithe. How to tithe if you have a mixture. How to do that. There's going to be 2 parts to that, and all of that will be in today's daf. It's small, but it's not so small. And whoever missed the beginning, the intro, I just want to say how important it is to remember the shita of Rabbi Akiva by Sfichen that we are not following. Okay, and therefore the Mara Fulda on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis, when the Mishnah said umutaren b'shvius, right, when he says by the exceptions Oides Doichen Pragan and Shumshumin, that if they were hishrishu lifnei Rosh Hashanah mutaren b'shvius, that means that even though they're coming out of the ground and you're harvesting them on the Shemitah year, we don't say it's asur midrabanan. No, all we're saying is that there is kedusha shvius or there's no kedusha shvius, but harvesting you could. And that's halacha l'maisa. Means all of the fields now in Israel before Rosh Hashanah, mamish, the people that keep Shemitah, they go through the fields, and any plant that began, that you can see any part of it, won't be yasad tzvichen. So don't think that all the vegetables that grow on Shemitah you can't eat. It's not so simple. Only the items that none of it came out of the ground before Shvius, they're midrabanan, we can't eat any of it. Tzvichen also midrabanan. Okay, hop in the Gemara. So the Mishnah began with the 4 exceptions. Oides, Doichan, Pragin, and Shumshumin. And again, even though normally we have the shiurim of Shlish, Hanata, Likita, These are the three shiurim. No, the Chachamim made a new shiur. What? Hashrasha. Okay, so now we said everything by heart already. But the Gemara wants to show you how Hashrasha is a novelty. Hashrasha is a novelty because normally you have the Torah rules. And like we mentioned, there are three rules. Either shlish, grains, olives, and grapes, or chanata by fruits, or lekita by vegetables. Don't forget that vegetables, b'chlal, don't have to be tithed midoiraisa, l'kula alma. Let's go, I know we all know this, let's follow Rashi and Tosfos hold. Let's go this sugya, let's just be consistent. Not like the Rambam, that what items have to be tithed midoiraisa, Rashi and Tosfos and Rosh Hashanah, grains, olives, and grapes. Which means that even chanata is a rabbinic point. They don't have to be tithed midoiraisa. The Rambam holds all the fruits. But let's go with this. It's important that it's going to be easier because these shitas will be quoted. And I know the little bit that I learned before, the Marafulda, the Rashirilio, they only bring shitas Rashi. They don't quote Rashi, but we're going to follow the sugya. And remember, there's a machlekes rishonim that midoiraisa, and this is important. What has to be tithed? B'chlal. Only dagan, tirosh, and yitzar. Okay, so let's go. The peiros, hiluchayach shlish. That's the rule. Nevertheless, came along our Mishnah and told us Achidish that uba oides, and oides doesn't only mean oides. Oides means oides, doichan, pragin, and shumshumin, acharash rasham, and ubi yarak, pshas likitosoi isuroi. This is the actual rule. I want to add another nuance. All these things we're going to start becoming familiar with. We have many more mesechtos ahead of us. When you say by vegetables, basar, likutoi, isuroi, machlekes rishonim, and the bavli, either it means when you actually picked it, bepoil, or when it was mature enough to be picked. This machlekes is bechlal not negeh for these dafim right now. I just want you to be aware of it. And of course, halacha l'maisa, it's a big nafkamina. Is it from when it was ready to be picked? Because when you leave it in the ground, there will be no benefit. Or no, likute means kapshutai, basa likute when you pick it. Okay. Now, first, step number one is midayin shehilchu beperes achar shlish. And guys, make no mistake. When I say peres doesn't mean fruits. Okay, peres means grains, olives, and grapes. So the Gemara quotes psukim that we have in Parshas Re'eh is important. And the Torah says, and you can look in the Torah Oira Shalom, and over there Aleph, the Torah says, Chag HaSukkos Ta'aselecha Shivas Yamim, and the Torah associates the Yom Tov of Sukkos to the time where Ba'aspecha, where you gather your goyden, your threshing floor refers to all of the 5 grains, and Yikvecha means your wine vat, right? Tirosh, wine. Now the question the Gemara is asking is that the Torah could have written Ba'aspecha, Garnecha, V'yikvecha. The mem is superfluous, it doesn't make sense. But when you gather Garnecha and Yikvecha, Vashteit mi Garnecha, from your fleshing floor. In other words, mi Garnecha, V'loi kol Garnecha, mi Yikvecha, and V'loi kol Yikvecha. What is the pasuk referring to? The pasuk is referring to that once something is already only fit for gathering. Why are we calling it fit for gathering? We know that the shade is a third. It's already considered minigea, the dinim of trumas u'maisres, a full-fledged product. Look inside the Marafulda, 6 lines from the top. Which means that even if you have a product, shadayin loy ivia kol garnecha, ela mixas. What's mixas? The Chazal said mixas means it came to a third. Karina bay, that's the words. Karina bay be aspecha. Be aspecha means if something is ra'ui la asifa, For the dinim of Maisris, it's already considered exist. It already is. It is for you to determine it isn't this year. It is in the second year. It's second year. If it didn't even reach a third, then it only belongs to the third year. Okay. Now the Torah never gave the sheet of a shlish. The word migarnacha, again, that's the way we're learning over here, that it's not full, it's not mature, but there is a certain point that even though it's not mature, we're going to use the words be'aspecha. It's as if it was gathered. But where does it say a third? Ma'ata filu pachas mishlish. Okay. So Amar Rab Ze'era, he's quoting another pasuk in the A, happens to be earlier in the beginning of the parsha when we read it all on Yom Tov. We begin Aser to Aser. Since it says in the beginning of that parsha, in the A, Aser to Aser eis kol tfuas zar echa, the emphasis will be on the word zar echa. Now zar echa means you're planting, and velad zar echa is merames, that when something reached a stage that if you were to pick it right now, its seeds have the koyach to reproduce. That's a third. That Chazal knew. Davar shuhu nizra umatzmiach. In other words, when do we consider a product ready, or at least somehow to ready? Ki'ilu ready. Mi garnacha. It's already considered that ba'aspecha. If when you harvest it, you can replant it. And we know that if something did not even reach a third, its seed doesn't have the koyach to reproduce. Al derech by human beings, right? That's the shit. I think 9 years in one day. This concept. Before that, a human being is not roi lohi. He can't have children. Yotza pachos mishlish she'eino nizra umatzmiach. How gavaldik is it? So we're putting two psukim together. Okay. So now,
where do we learn olives from?
We'll get there in a moment. They're very good. We'll get there in a moment. In other words, the pasuk that we began with only spoke about goiden. Goiden, we are saying, it means a threshing floor, but this refers to grains. And yikvecha means wine. A minute. Very good. So now, ma'ata frekti gemara shlish harishain l'sha'avar ushlish hasheni lahaba. You know what? Let's learn Pnei Moshe. They all say the same thing. Pnei Moshe is a bit more elaborate here. Ma'ata is 10 lines from the top. It's like a middle and a narrow lines. Ma'ata frekti gemara parech akate. Nemo still. The af dilomadnu. Yeah, we learned that the misha hevi shlish, once it reached the third, kvar higia lo'oinas hamaiser. Okay. Vim came. Why don't we say that in the same product itself, that third, most people don't harvest it when it's only a third. Since we have a remes that once it reached the third, that belongs to the year in which it reached the third, okay, but let the other 2/3 belong to the next year. And why don't we say that the shlish sheni doesn't only mean the second third, it means whatever else grows. Should be yisasher leba. Kifi oisa shana haba. So in other words, every harvest, some of it will be from the second year, some of it will be from the third year. Why don't we do that? That's the Gemara's kasha.
It's not some of the harvest. It's the same exact food item. We're saying part of it from before and part of it from after.
If we have this migarnacha, a remes, that, see, the word ba'aspecha means royal asifa. And we'd already determined it has to do with zarecha. So if the Torah is saying that from when something is ro'ui la asifa, first the dinam of maisris, it's already considered gathered. Okay, so then when you go from the first to the second year, it won't be a difference. Ma'aser sheni. But when you go from the second to the third, or from the fifth to the sixth, or for dinam of Shemitah from the sixth to the seventh, why don't we divide every fruit? So Amar Rabbi Yechanan, michag asukos. Gewaldik. And here we go. Now, what's the michag asukos? So this is a mamish gewaldik. the guys were jumping to Parshas Vayelach. Look at these limudim. This limud we don't have in the Bavli at all. By the mitzvah of Hakel, Vishteit, it says like this. It says Mikei Sheva Shanim, V'moyet Shnas Hashmita, B'Chag HaSukkos. And here's a kasha. The kasha is, when we celebrate Hakel on the 8th year. Hakel, my friends, is in the year after Shemitah. I know that when does the king actually gather the people? On the first day, Chol HaMoed Sukkos. Correct. Right, the night before Matzah Yom Tov, they build a real big additional platforms in the Beis HaMikdash, but people gather right after. So why did the Torah link this Chag HaSukkos to Shnas HaShemitah? Why is that? The Chag HaSukkos is not Chag HaShemitah. Look inside the Marafulda, last few lines in the narrow lines going into the big lines. That it says, and here's the question, why does the Torah say Shnas HaShemitah Korile? Why are we calling it Shemitah? That year, the year of Hakel is after Shemitah. Elomatz al Sha'avra Koidim Rosh Hashanah. Kidchsiv Mikei Sheva Shana. V'Amar b'Chag HaSukkos. Harei Chag HaSukkos. L'Shana Zu Nechshav. Chag HaSukkos is still considered part of the year before. The Chag HaSukkos is still, of the 8th year, is still considered the 7th year. So since you see that Sukkos of the 8th year is really considered the 7th year, so now from here, Hachinami ba'aspecha. Now we're going back to the pasuk, the first pasuk in the A. Ba'aspecha migadnecha umiyekvecha. That once something was ra'ui la'asifa, meaning ra'ui to give, to reproduce, which means it brought a third, then all of it goes to the Shana Sha'avra, all of it. That's his limud. Let's read it inside. Amar Rabbi Yechanan mechag HaSukkos. That ma chag HaSukkos, just like when it comes to the mitzvah of Hakel. Really, Sukkos is laba. Sukkos is of the 8th year. The Torah doesn't call it the 8th year. The Torah calls it the 7th year. Ba'at mahalach boi l'sha'avar. Gavaldik. So the elu means by here, since the third, which reached the maturity, we already established, is nisaser, based on the Shana Sha'avra, so everything goes l'Shana Sha'avra. Hein laba, even though beyond the third, the other 2/3 is laba, only got ready in the next year. Nevertheless, for all of it, va'at mahalach ba l'sha'avar. Okay, so that's that. So now we established that we have grains, very good, Rabbi Mendel, and wine, shlish. So why are we making a difference? So frag the Gemara, that's a kashem. That noimer af ba'oires u'b'doichen u'pragen u'b'shumshum and kain. No, make a binyan av. I understand. We have, if everything is learned from Dagan and Tirosh, like we mentioned, we're going to go with the Shitois that everything else is only midrabanan. So whatever has to be tied is Dagan and Tirosh. If the Torah establishes beremes that Dagan and Tirosh follows mi gornecha zar echa, mi gornecha zar echa, which means a shlish, so everything should follow the same rule. 2 answers, what we said in the Mishnah, and is what we're going to learn right now. So Rab Chuna, that's the answer. Rab Chuna bar Chia Amar. Now his words are Shei efsher la'amid olav. I'm going to teach not. It's too hard otherwise. It's too hard otherwise. Look inside the Marafulda. E efsher la'amid olav. Bishloima, guys, Marafulda, 7 lines from the bottom. Bishloima, Gabi Dagan. V'chol hasada mevi shlish bevas achas. They all reach the third at the same time. So once all of the produce at the same time reach the zarecha, now that's the year. I don't care when you harvest it. Masha'en kein hane is oides, doichen, pragen, and shumshumin. Ein kol hasada mevi shlish ke'achas. V'im kein, so what will happen if we're going to follow the rule of shlish? Habale yoshan v'chadash biyachad. You're going to have one harvest. That means you planted something at the same time. But when you harvest it, some of it brought a shlish lifnei Rosh Hashanah. The zeve maybe shlish rishain acher Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, this is a very important, the Marav folder. The kivin, the maestros halolo adirabanan. This is to answer Rabbi Mendel's question. Where do you have anything by olives? How can the Chazal give you another shear, not like the Torah? If the Torah through Zarecha, through Migarnecha, Zarecha and Hakel, it's a composite. We came to the Shlish, the Chachamim don't have the right to change it. The answer is, according to Rashi and Tosfos, you bet they do. Because anything that's Midoi Raisa, if the Torah said a Shlish, you can't change it. But other than olives, which is the only third one not yet mentioned, which is Chayev Midoi Raisa, nothing else has to be tithed at all. Since Maises Alolu Derabanan, 3 lines in the bottom and the Marafulda of Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, the Min Atoiram, only Dagan, Tiroish, and Yitzar. That's you have the Yitzar is the olive oil, Ksiv. Over there, you have to tithe it. Everything else is only Midrabanan. Since the whole thing is only Midrabanan, Yesh Koech V'Yad Chachamim L'Kvoya Lohem Zman Ke'echad. So they are looking for these oires, doichen, pragen, and shumshumin. When are they all at the same time? You can't say when you seed it in the ground because nothing happened yet. The earliest is Hashrasha. Shekulam hishrishu ka'achas. Why shaharei ka'achas nizru? Have to know the mitzias. In other words, even though that from there on they begin to develop on their own pace, but the Hashrasha, which is near the Ziriya, happens all at the same time. Turning to Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis. Okay. Now, frag the Gemara. I have a problem to this answer. So, in other words, the answer that we said in the Mishnah, the answer that we are repeating today, is that if we don't want for there to be uneven tithing, we don't want for there to be one harvest that belongs to 2 years. And therefore, since it doesn't follow a third, we give another zman. Now we got a problem. Now we're quoting Mesivin Akasha against Chuna Barchia. Now, like I mentioned in the words of introduction, and I want to tell you right now that I was preparing this yesterday, and it seems to me, I know we're gonna have clarity in 2 daf from now, that there was a machloikis here in the Noise Kalim to come to the place of this Braisa. The beginning of the Braisa is mamish like the Mishnah. Now we're moving on to Pula Mitzri. Whatever we said in the Mishnah is simple. Simple is, Pula Mitzri is also a product that doesn't develop at the same pace. The seeds. But the Mishnah establishes that if you plant Pul HaMitzri for its yerek, for its greens, then Pul HaMitzri will not be an exception. What year will it belong to? The year that you harvested it. It's called by vegetables, basar, likutoi isurai. It goes after the likita. No question. When our Mishnah, when Rab Shimon Shazuri said that Pul HaMitzri is like oires and doichen and pragen and shumshumim that you go to Hashrasha, that's when the person who planted the Pul HaMitzri had the kavana lizera. So the Mishnah gave a very simple either or binary. Planted it for yarak, it's like a vegetable, likita. You planted it for the seed, hashrasha, amachaya. Question will be, that's where the Braisa gets more elaborate. What happens if you planted it for one and you changed your mind? The Rashirilio here, 3 lines on the right column, is understanding the case that we are referring to where you first planted it liyarak and you changed your mind lizera. I just want to say that whoever has an art scroll, he says the opposite. So whichever one detail, and we're going to learn about this in 2 days. I know we're going to get clarity on this. I just want to say that when there are times that when you change your mind, which way to the other, I'm not certain yet. But if you planted it for one, and then you changed your mind, at some scenario, there are different scenarios. The Braisa says like this, that then we'll have to see. If the greens, listen to it's almost like inverted logic. If the greens became ready before Rosh Hashanah, then we call it a vegetable. And then what year does it belong to? When you harvested it, which will be later. because you harvest it. Even though the green got ready, the seeds are still developing. You're going to harvest it later. If the greens were not ready before Rosh Hashanah, then we'll classify it like Rab Shimon HaShazuri. Even though there was a change of mind, we're going to classify it as something that was planted for its seed, and the seed already took root before Rosh Hashanah. Happens to be that Pula Mitzri does not get ready at the same time. The green part does not get ready at the same time. So just like Oides, Doichen, Pragen, and Shumshumin, when you plant them, let's say, I don't know, I'm guessing, a month before Rosh Hashanah, just a guess, because we already learned about rice, that rice takes 60 days, you have to plant it, you have to replant it, whatever the time is. If you plant it somewhere before Rosh Hashanah, it's getting matured over that time of the year. And not at the same time, the same thing over here. You're going to have in the same plantation of this Pula Mitzri, some of it, the green was ready before Rosh Hashanah. That part has to be tied L'Shana Haba. The ones whose greens were not ready before Rosh Hashanah will now be classified like Zera, like Shimon Shazuri, after Hashrasha. So there's a mixture. Now, what happens when you have a mixture? I just want to say, when you have a mixture, you have two issues. First of all, you cannot be ma'asad from one year over the other. You cannot be ma'asad 1 year over the other. That's issue number one. You know how you resolve that issue? If you have a pile of produce from different years, if you properly mix them up, then you can say that when you remove the maisres, the proportion of it that belongs to the previous year, in your truma, you have that proportion. Equivalent. The part, let's say it was 80-20. If you properly mix all of it up, so any part has in it 80-20. So you resolve, you can't be ma'asad from 1 year over the other by mixing it up. But then there's another issue. Don't forget, there are two. What's the other issue? What do you do with, you don't know how much. What do you do with Meiser Sheni? What do you do with Meiser Ani? I'm not even talking about Shvi'is, which is easier, really, ironically. And here the answer is very simple. What you do is that you separate Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni has the great advantage that you could be poide it. I redeem it over money. The money, I don't know how much percent, all of the money has to be taken to Yerushalmi. What remains, you have to give to the ani. What remains, you give to the ani. So you covered all your bases. You chapped? But again, it's important to remember, we're learning new dinim over here, is that you have to resolve two issues. Issue number one is that if you have a harvest that has a mixture in it from 2 years, let's say from the second year and third year, or from the fourth year, from the fifth year and the sixth year, Truma is the same. Meiser Rishon is the same. Meiser Sheni, first of all, some of it is from the third. There's no chiyuv of Meiser Sheni on it. For that, the solution is, read inside the Braisa, take items that belong to 2 different years and properly mix them well. So proportionally, whatever you will separate, you will argue that from that separation, you have the same exact proportion from the remainder. And then, step number 2, that the Braisa doesn't even mention, but Poyel Mamish is at Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani. You don't even know what percent. All of it is Meiser Sheni. All of it redeem, and then all of it give to an Ani. So then whatever part belonged to whatever part, you covered all of your bases. The Nimtza Ma'aser Mizarei El Yarkoi Miyarkoi El Zaroi. So what do we see from over here? What's the kasha the Gemara is asking to a Chuna Barchia? You see over here that it's not the end of the world if you have one pile of produce that has in it from 1 year and in it from another year, that we got a solution. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yusa, that Kaima Chuna Bar Chama, don't refute Chuna Bar Chana so quickly. His opinion stands. Same thing, Rabbi Yoina says the same thing. That Chuna Bar Chia, Rabbi Yoina quoted the Shita. He upheld the Shita of Chuna Bar Chia, which all comes in the name of Shmuel, being that it says Aser to Aser Eis Kol Tfuas Zar Echa. We already quoted this pasuk before. So why do we learn another limud, a new limud from this Aser to Aser, that Ma'aser at Maser Echad B'Shana Achas, ve'ein at Ma'aser Shnei Maisres B'Shana Haba. In other words, we're not resolving the case of the Baraisa by the Pula Mitzri where there was a change of intent. But we are saying that it's not only a logic, but the logic of Chuna Bar Chana is based on the pasuk. Aser to Aser is called Tfu Zarecha. From there we learn that everything should be of the same year. We don't want to have a mixture in which you have in it from one year and from the other year. So the pasuk itself doesn't allow you to happen. And therefore, the oires and the doichen and the pragin and the shumshumin, we have to give it another shiur. We have to give it another point in its growth, another determinant. And that determinant is basar hashrash. The Gemara says, but you didn't answer my question. Very nice that Chuna Bar Chama is leaning on Aser to Aser. But still, Hativa in fragt die Gemara. Harei Pula Mitzri, Harei Ushnei Meisres B'Shona Echos, and the Braisa teaches you that there's a solution. Soiver es Gardner L'Toichoi, v'nimtza ma'aser mizarei al Yarkoi umi Yarkoi al Zaroi. So I know that one way of learning the Gemara in the Yerushalmi is that the Gemara is saying, but I got a problem. There's a whole other way of learning it. And that is, I know that when you have no Breira, if you have no option, there is a solution. There is a solution, which will be the case that we mentioned. You planted the Pula Mitzri for one intent, whichever one it was. You changed your mind. I know it's only in one of the directions, but we'll see later which one it is. But in a certain scenario, we say, if it reached the greens before Rosh Hashanah, mis'ased l'shana haba, which means mis'ased when you were harvesting it. If the greens were not even ready, fully matured before Rosh Hashanah, then you go after the seed, and the seed, Rab Shimon Shazuri Paskins, it goes after the Ashrasha. But Poyel Mamish, you're going to have a mixture. In an exceptional case where you have no option, we have a solution. But to lechatchila make by oiris and doichen and pragen and shumshumim, it will always be that way. We don't want, for every time you harvest a certain product, we don't want that you're going to have in the same harvest from 2 different years, because we have the aser to aser, ma'aser at ma'aser echad b'shana achas, ve'ein at ma'aser shnei ma'aser b'shana achas. And the solution will be, like we mentioned, to give it a determinant that will allow everything to belong to the same year, and that will be basar hashrasha. So Atkan, the Gemara giving you the source of the Iraisa, everything that's midrabanan. The Chachamim have the right to make another Zman. That's very important. The Marafulda and Oidis and Doichen, the reason that we gave is the reason that we had until now. And tomorrow we're going to pick up the same, a whole new reason why Chazal gave for the Oidis, Doichen, Pragan and Shumshumim, this new shear of Hashrasha to be